Hello, I'm Sherry Sturman, Director of Crayola Education, and we're excited to share with you the Creative Spa for Teachers. It's really for everyone who works with kids. It's a special time to rejuvenate, refresh yourself, and rekindle your creative spirit. And while you're getting great creative experiences for yourself, you're also going to learn some tips for how to bring these to children. I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, Mark Westmoquette, who started his career with a PhD in astrophysics and is now a yoga and Zen teacher. Let's start by learning more about you, Mark. What inspired your interest in astrophysics, and how does your background in this scientific field inform your work around yoga and mindfulness?
I was quite good at maths and physics, I suppose, at school, and I was drawn to that side of things. And I always thought that astronomy was the coolest of all the sciences because it was so visual, and all the the pictures that you get from the Hubble Space Telescope and really captured my imagination. I kind of headed off to do astrophysics when I was 18 years old and kind of got really into it. I think looking back now from where I am in my life, I realized that there was another thing going on. So I had a number of experiences in my childhood, in my teenage years, that were really quite traumatic and difficult. And so part of the reason I think why I ended up studying astronomy was essentially to escape, to go to the furthest reaches of the universe and to get away from, dealing with stuff that was happening in my life. So I kind of ended up on this journey finding yoga and then finding meditation and mindfulness and Zen. And that really enabled me to understand myself a bit more, I suppose. So that was about 8 years ago, something like that. And I've spent quite some time since then trying to find ways to bring those two worlds together, like science and astrophysics and the cool images that you see from Hubble, and also our perspective on the universe and who we are and how we understand ourselves.
Beautiful. I love the way you talk about the bridges and connecting. And in fact, you often talk about that magical experience of connecting our inner universe with the outer universe. This happens when we realize that the stars and space that we see every night have been here since the beginning of time. And there's this remarkable connection that we have with all other humans who have come before us and who are looking up at the same time we are. Talk to us about the joy and the significance of connecting our inner universe with the outer universe.
If we go back maybe 10,000 years, humans would have been living on this planet for a few 100,000 years, at least at that point. And, we got our campfire, we'd have cooked our dinner, we'd have been socializing a bit, with our fellow Stone Age humans. And it's a beautiful dark night. We just look up and it's like, wow, the fire is a bit far away and it's just dark from horizon to horizon. And we see all this glittering stars and we're very familiar with it because we're the kind of people in those days, we would have lived outside all the time. So we're familiar, but yet still, when we look up and we see that beautiful dark sky all the way across from horizon to horizon, it's like, wow. So the same questions that would have come up to those Stone Age humans come up for us. It's the same questions. What is it? How far away are they? What does it mean to me, on human here on this planet? And one of the amazing things is that, as you said, Sherry, that the stars in the patterns that they're at are the same as they would have been for those Stone Age humans as they are for us today. So the stars, they move a little bit, and there's been some very slight movements, but essentially it's the same constellations, the same patterns as every human I've ever have seen who has ever lived on this planet. I find that blows my mind every time I think of it, every time I realize that. So if we think a little bit more about connecting our inner to our outer universe, another thing that really blows my mind is to realize that, so as a human, we're made of mostly carbon, and hydrogen and oxygen. So hydrogen and oxygen make up water. And then we've got carbon and nitrogen and a few other bits and pieces that make up our physical body. 95% of the hydrogen that is in our body was created at the very beginning of the universe in the Big Bang. And then every other element after that, all the nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, all the rest of it, all the little pieces of magnesium and copper and iron and things that we find in our body were created inside stars in the distant past. So stars are basically chemical factories. They convert hydrogen into helium and helium into lithium, beryllium, and all the rest of it. And then they get blown out into space and they float around. And then eventually they would have coalesced into our solar system, into our planet. And then we eat the foods and drink the water that comes from our planet. So we're literally created from material that was once inside stars. So if that doesn't connect our inner to our outer, I don't know what else does.
What a beautiful way of describing our connection to stars. And I love the way you describe how stargazing really moves us back and forth in time and connects us with all the stargazers around the globe and who's ever looked up at space. So many of the parents and teachers who are with us might be feeling that they're not knowledgeable enough about space or constellations to be able to share this learning experience with children. Please share your thoughts on how to get started and help adults realize that this is a relaxing experience, that you don't need to have all the answers, and just to be open to figuring it out together with the kids. It's really based in curiosity, not expertise.
We've got access to so much information these days. We have the apps and we can look on Google and, we cover this stuff in school physics classes. And so when you go outside with kids and they ask a question, like a lot of the time you feel like you need to know the answer to what they ask. So why is the sky blue? Or how far away is that star? And you think, oh gosh, I just don't know any of that stuff. Absolutely no need to feel like you need to know everything. In fact, I've been studying astronomy for years and I still don't know, all the answer to those kind of questions. It's a practice of shared wonder. So we can go outside and, adults also ask similar questions. Kids ask great questions, often really straight to the point kind of questions. And it's like, well, I don't know. Let's wonder together. Maybe we can look that up on Google later, that kind of thing. Or maybe you can jot down the questions as you go, just look them up later, that kind of thing.
Love that expression, shared wonder. And thank you for the reminder that adults do not have to have the answers. We can lean into children's questions, feed off their curiosity, our curiosity, and really explore together. So beyond the educational experience, please share with our viewers how stargazing can be a mindfulness practice.
Mindfulness at its root is about being with our present moment and then also doing our best not to judge what we find to be good or bad. We often jump to, I wish it was more like this. I've gone outside. I wish it was clearer. I wish there wasn't so much light pollution, all that kind of stuff. Or this is beautiful. I want to hold on to it. I wish it could be like this forever, that kind of thing. So mindfulness becomes a practice of being with what is and allowing it to be that way. Now, that really means immersing ourselves in just the present experience. So how do we mindfully stargaze? So we can go outside and then we can just let things be as they are. So maybe settling onto a chair, looking up. Oh, there's a few clouds. Oh, there's a bit of noise from our next door neighbor. And we're just open to experiencing this as it is. So I would recommend looking at one point and then just allow your vision to expand out so that we're looking with the whole of our vision rather than just the middle of our vision. And then once we've got a sense of sight, we can incorporate our other senses. So what can we hear? What are the nighttime sounds? often at nighttime it's cold or cool. So is it okay to be cold for a little bit? Maybe just for 5 minutes, experiencing the cold, the breeze on your cheek, and just allow that also to be part of it. So we're looking up, we're hearing, and we're feeling. And that way it becomes a whole body experience of being with the nighttime. Mindfulness is also very good for stepping out of our whirlwind, of daily hectic thoughts and busyness. So, when we come into this experience of being and listening and feeling, then the thoughts tend to just quieten away a little bit. People often tell us to get a perspective on things, get a long view. Well, I think that looking up at the night sky gives us the longest view we possibly can on this planet. We're seeing stars that are literally hundreds of light years away, and that really, really can change our perspective.
Great tips to prepare our minds for the mindfulness. You also have suggestions for how to physically set up a stargazing experience with a blanket, a hot cup of cocoa. Give us some of those practical tips to prepare. As you said, it often can get a bit chilly outside.
A bit away from lights, if much as you can, away from any distractions. Getting a nice horizon, so not too much trees or buildings around. Something like a sun lounger or a deck chair that you can recline and lean right back. Get yourself a couple of blankets, get your fairy slippers on. The earmuffs, quite nice if it's really cold. Cup of hot cocoa or, your coffee or whatever you need. And then just kind of settle into it, get yourself nice and comfy, lean back and look up. That would be the place that I'd start.
Great suggestions. And Mark, as you often point out, the stars are not visible every night. And sometimes it is difficult to plan the right evening for a stargazing experience. Please share some tips with families for how to find a good night to try this experience, and give some ideas for what they might do if they're all set up, physically, mentally ready, and then they find the stars are not available as they had planned.
That's the beauty, I suppose, of making it a mindful experience, because if we go outside to stargaze, inevitably the conditions will be different to what we'd hoped. The weather forecast says it's going to be clear. It's been saying it's going to be clear for a couple of days. We go outside and there's the cloud. So it's just kind of what happens. So what do we do if it's cloudy? First of all, with our mindfulness, it's not about wanting it to be in a particular way. So we've done our best to try to make it the clearest night, that we've chosen a good night. But when we go outside and it isn't clear, or there's a bit of cloud, or something's different, then it's about just being okay with things as they are. So we can look at the clouds and be interested in the clouds. We can think about maybe, where do the clouds come from? How do they move through the sky? Do they always move in the same direction? Are they moving fast or slow? Are there textures and colors in the clouds? Maybe a sunset or, a little bit leftover light, and we can see some colors in the clouds, that kind of thing. So just kind of enjoying looking at the clouds themselves. If it's particularly like totally overcast and we want to do some stargazing, then actually there's lots we can do there too, using some resources online. So we can, I really liked, in fact, when I was doing my little bit of creativity myself, I actually looked up a picture of the moon, and so you get it up on your computer screen and make it as big as you can. And then, it's just beautiful to look at a picture of the moon. It's kind of like you're looking down a telescope, really, when you've got it big on your computer screen, and all the different craters and textures and that kind of stuff. Or indeed any other picture, like a Hubble picture of a nebula or galaxy. We can bring that up on the screen and enjoy the colors and shapes and things. Yeah, so there's plenty you can do, even if it's not as clear as you'd hoped.
So Mark, please guide us through a stargazing meditation with prompts that families could use when they're outside.
I actually quite like to start off by closing the eyes. So we've got ourselves all comfortable, and we just let the eyes close, bring the attention inside the body. Just start by establishing a sense of presence in your body. We just move our attention, noticing the face, the neck and shoulders, and then down through the body, the chest, the spine, the way your arms are, hands, your belly, legs, feet. And then just letting your attention come onto the sense of weight of your body, noticing how heavy your body is resting, whether you're on the chair or whether you're lying down or wherever you are, just that sense of weight. And noticing the weight is all about gravity and being held by the earth. So just to begin with, we've got our sense of our body being held to the earth through the gravity, and that brings our attention down into the ground and to notice the planet beneath our feet. So even that by itself is just amazing, to know that we're here on this giant ball of rock. We're being held by gravity. And in our body, we can feel that. Once we've got that sense of downward gravity, we can then lift our gaze, look up, open the eyes gradually. And what that will have done is given us a chance for our eyes to adapt to the dark. And as I mentioned earlier, so it's nice to just fix your eyes on the middle of the sky and then just become aware of everything you can see without moving your eyes around too much. When we get stressed, what tends to happen is that our eyes get really kind of narrow. We're just looking at the middle of our vision. And when we open up to like the periphery and everything around, it sends a signal to the body that everything is calm and okay. And that's the kind of mind place we want to be in for our mindful stargazing, nice and soft and relaxed and open, curious. You might start to see stars or a number of stars. If it's really dark, you can maybe start to see some fainter ones. Just allow that to come into what you're seeing. All around the edges, we've got the landscape, maybe trees, buildings, other things that you're noticing around. If you're looking even through a window, you can do it through the window, noticing the window, Sometimes when we look for a while and it's kind of nice and dark, then you might see a shooting star. And that's like, oh, wow. Or you might see something like an airplane, like a blinking light. Or sometimes we see a satellite, and you can notice a difference because a satellite will be traveling very steadily and slowly across the sky in one line. So then we can open up our attention to the other senses that I mentioned, like being aware of the sounds. Sometimes there's cars, people, sometimes even little scuffling or shuffling noises in the bushes, little animals. How does it feel to be here? When the sky is clear and there are no clouds, essentially the atmosphere becomes basically like a window, like a transparent window. In the daytime, it's blue and we can't see through it. But in the nighttime, it's transparent and we're looking out at the universe, looking out into space. And the stars are so far, vastly far away, so far away it's unimaginable. But yet they're coming down through the window and we're seeing it. So we're in this time where we're receiving the light from distant space. We're here on planet Earth with our sense of gravity on this ball. And some people like to call that spaceship Earth. And all these humans, we're all living on this spaceship and we're traveling through space, orbiting the sun's orbiting our galaxy. And we're looking out at almost like the sea, right? If we were on a ship, we'd be looking at the sea, but we're on the spaceship Earth and we're looking out into space and Earth is moving. And we're looking out to where we're traveling. So it takes us from a place of thinking like, oh, I'm just in my little back garden or whatever, actually on this giant spaceship traveling through the cosmos.
Beautiful. I love the way you describe the night sky as a transparent window that lets us see what is there during the day, but we can't see it until it's nightfall. That is beautiful. So, Mark, let's talk about the stories that have been told about stars. There are many culturally based narratives about constellations and night stars. In Western culture, many of those have roots in Greek or Roman mythology. But I love how you point out that every indigenous culture has created stories about the stars and imagined characters based on their night sky observations. Please tell us some of those interesting stories that you've heard.
One of the most remarkable visualizations, I suppose, of the night sky that's so different to what we have in the West comes from Aboriginal Australian cultures. And so being in the Southern Hemisphere, cultures in the Southern Hemisphere get the beautiful Milky Way in a way that we don't really in the Northern Hemisphere. And so we think of constellations as being the points of light, the stars that we connect the dots between and we see the shapes. But when you see the bright Milky Way, like if you're looking towards the center in the Southern Hemisphere, then actually it's really bright with dark patches in between. And the dark patches are actually dust clouds that are in the foreground. They're obscuring the light of the stars in the distance. So one of the Aboriginal ways of seeing things is to see an emu, the shape of an emu in the dust clouds that obscure the Milky Way band. And actually, once you've got it in your mind, and I was lucky enough to be able to go to the Southern Hemisphere and look at it, it's striking. You know, there's the beak and the head and the neck and the body in this dark. So it's kind of like seeing in the negative. There's another story that comes out of Japanese and Chinese culture, which is very beautiful. I'll see if I can get it roughly right. There were the gods who lived in heaven, and the Milky Way they saw as a kind of a bit more like a river. And on one side, there was the daughter of one of the kings of heaven, who was a weaver princess. She wove clothes, and she would help to mend the clothes and create new clothes for the gods of heaven. And on the other side of the river, there was a cowherd who lived in heaven and looking after all the heavenly cows. And one day they met and they fell in love. And they fell so deeply in love that they, you know, as what often happens when you meet someone for the first time, you spend all your time together and like they become your world, right? So the weaver girl stopped mending the clothes, and they, you know, all the gods of heaven, their clothes were in tatters, you know, she was forgetting her duties. And then all the cows started wandering everywhere because he was forgetting his duties of looking after the cows. So the king of heaven stepped in and said, look, this can't do, we can't have this. So he put them back on the two sides of the Milky Way. And so they're represented by the stars Altair and Vega, which are two bright stars that you can see on either side of the Milky Way here in the Northern Hemisphere. They're very obvious. And he said that once a year, they may meet on the 7th day of the 7th lunar month. So often it's celebrated on 7th of July, but actually it's on the lunar calendar, it's now shifted a little bit. And what happens is that a flock of magpies fly up and they create a bridge across the Milky Way. And at that point, the two lovers can meet once a year. And I understand in Japan and China, it's kind of like Valentine's Day that day, where you think about lovers separated and that kind of thing. And the magpies, it's interesting. We see actually between Altair and Vega, we see the constellation Cygnus, which is the swan. And that's like a bird, it's got wings. And in Japan and China, they see it more like magpies, you know, so kind of similar. No, I love that too. It's that idea of lovers being separated at a distance.
So when we create artwork, we transform this evening experience into something that's really permanent that we can look back on and reflect. We'd love for you to share some examples of the Starry Night art that you've created and some tips so families can create more of their own art.
So I mentioned before about putting a big picture of the moon up on the screen. And so that's kind of where I started with this one. So I kind of like getting a sense of maybe the moon and the craters. And so I used some of the, what have we got here? The metallic markers to get the real silver. And then we've got some of the like darker patches, like white crayon. I found that quite good, white crayon. And then some like silver and white markers, and then some of the dark areas. So the moon's got all sorts of shades and what they call seas, you know, on the moon. Actually, they're not seas, they're just craters really, but they call them seas. So getting a sense of the dark parts, and then like the, you know, star-studded sky and maybe a bit of wispy clouds. That was my take on that anyway. Yeah. And then, so another, like taking on the emu idea, you know, this emu being the dark in the Milky Way, I was kind of interested to maybe explore some of that, and just using these points. Quite like that idea. Maybe the points felt to me like there were stars, you know, and just tracing out the shape of the emu. It's a nice, what, you know, you see these mindful coloring books these days, which are all in the shops. There's about kind of little doodling in small spaces. I found this one very mindful, just kind of going round and round and round. You know, you just get really absorbed with the and then choosing the different colors. So again, like all the metallic and glittery markers, that was really helpful for that. And then another one I tried was to capture this idea of the lovers being separated that I mentioned. And it's quite a challenge to get the Milky Way going on, you know, the middle bit. So I had a bit of gold going on, and then I chose the different colors, like some glittery pink for the Weaver Princess and blue, just trying to get the distinction between the two lovers on either side, maybe reaching towards each other.
Mark, those sketches were incredible. Love that. Let's show our viewers how they can make stargazing art. Would love for you to demonstrate how they can use materials at home and create their own vision.
So I thought that maybe you could try looking at the constellation of Orion's belt. So I'm going to turn my page. It's probably the most recognizable constellation, one of the most recognizable constellations in the sky. So got a few stars, essentially like this. So that's pretty much where we're starting, Orion's belt. So Orion was this mythological hunter who was part of the Greek myths, and he said one day, he said, I think I can kill all the animals on the planet. I'm such a good hunter, I could kill every single animal. And at that, the earth goddess heard what he said, and said, no, I'm not having any of that. I'm going to send a scorpion. A scorpion came to test him. So Orion and the scorpion, they had a fight, and actually the scorpion managed to sting Orion, but in doing so, Orion also managed to kill the scorpion. So they killed each other. They both died, and because of this, Zeus, the king of heaven, put them both in the sky, but they put them both in the sky as far away as they possibly could be. So Orion's in the north and the scorpion is in the south. So these are the silver sparkle markers, and I think I probably need to just give it a bit of a push down to get a bit of head is roughly there. And we've got a body, so shoulders, and then we're coming down, body. Now what's quite nice about Orion is that roughly, let's see, here-ish, it's got this Orion's Nebula, which is kind of like quite colourful when you look at it through a telescope. So we're going to add a bit of colour. And Orion's Nebula forms part of his belt, his sword, which just hangs down from his belt. So we've got his sword, like this, as well as his legs. Oops, that's not the right one. This one here, right? His legs. His legs. We need a bit more red in that. We need a nebula. Let's give it a bit of a push down, get a bit of colour coming through. Orion, actually, when you look at it through certain telescopes, you can see that there's a giant red nebula, which is all the way around here. It's difficult to see with your eyes, but it's just kind of around there. And then over here, we've got his shield. So I'm going to draw it. So it says shield. Yeah. So there's Orion.
Love that, Mark. And watching you draw the scene around Orion really brings to mind how art brings together observation and imagination. So tell us a bit about how it was rooted in what you observed in the night sky, and then you added that imaginative storytelling to it.
So Orion, it's basically the 3 stars of the belt plus 1, 2 of his shoulders and 1, 2 of his feet. And that's it, when we look up. And way back, so Orion Nebula, Orion constellation, as a myth, as a object, as a pattern, I suppose, dates back to maybe 3,000 or 4,000 BC, or perhaps even earlier as an idea. And it's been passed down to us, this idea, this myth of Orion, through the ancient Sumerians and Babylonians into Greek and Roman, and then our present day. And all of that time, the story of Orion, which was originally Gilgamesh, the hero Gilgamesh in the original Sumerian myths, it's evolved and changed, who he was and what he did. But there's definitely a thread of that story which passes down to us. And so not just the pattern of stars, culturally in our humanity has this deep connection with this figure, this hero. And so we can bring a little bit of that, like imagination. Okay, well, so he's got a head and he's got arms and he's got this shield. And then this science fact, okay, there's this nebula down here, which is one of the nearest places where stars are forming in the galaxy. And it's right here in Orion's Nebula, which is forming his sword. So it's very enmeshed, how, what we see, what we imagine, what we know, what we see in the telescope, bringing it all together. And that creates our present moment experience, which is not just in our heads, but it's in our whole bodies. Our cultural memory and our storytelling is so important to us as humans, as a species. And we can bring it all down into our piece of creativity at that moment. I think it's very nice.
Mark, you articulated that so beautifully. This experience does blend science, storytelling, mindfulness, and creative self-expression. What closing remarks or last bits of advice would you like to share with our participants to keep that stargazing and mindfulness going in their own backyards?
You don't need an app to do stargazing. You don't need technology. You don't need a telescope or binoculars. There's something really human about going outside, lying down under the sky and looking with your eyes, looking with your body into the night sky, and just being with things as they are.
Great tip. Focus on curiosity, not technology. Really immerse yourself in the experience. Love that. We want to thank Mark West-Moquette for inspiring us today. To keep up with Mark's work, visit his website and follow him on social media. And we want to thank all of you for joining us today. Stay well, stay strong, and take care of yourself creatively.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.